All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Today's a little bit different with our third Thursday. We wanted to kind of go through how to use Excel. We have had multiple questions come up recently about, well, I'm not sure how to do this or how do I do that in Excel. So I want to make sure that everybody is kind of on the same page with how to do different things. So this month and next month, we're going to focus strictly on Excel. As we move into UASys, all reports are going to be able to export to Excel. So I want you to be comfortable doing different things with it. And that's where we're going to start with the very basics today of just kind of how moving around to inserting different things. We'll move into some formulas today if we've got some time. And then next month, we're going to probably wrap up formulas and go into pivot tables and how those work and everything else. Again, if you've got questions, please jump off of mute or put your questions in the chat. I do have Alex here, and she usually helps me with questions that come up as I'm not always attentive to the chat. So I am recording this if you do need to go back and watch it later, and for those that are unable to view it live today. So kind of want to go through a couple things. Again, I teach Excel on a regular basis to programs, users, different people. And this is kind of my very basic learning how to do Excel. So when I go into this with the assumption that you don't know a whole lot about Excel, terminology wise, different things like that. Um, and so one thing that I want to really kind of focus on is some of the terminology that we'll end up using, things that you need to make sure that you are aware of as we go through this training. Um, so first off, I want to just talk about that very top part is called the ribbon. When I do kind of show you guys the um, trail, the path that I take to click certain buttons, I'm always talking about the ribbon up on the very top. So I just kind of want to make sure. So if I tell you go up in the ribbon and click on, say, the data tab, this is the ribbon is what I'm talking about on the very, very top. Um, Excel files are just another word for what is called a workbook. So an Excel file is a workbook. I use those interchangeably. You either open up the workbook or you open up the Excel file. Those are always interchanged. When you open up Excel at the very beginning, if you've never opened up Excel before, this is kind of what your screen will look like on this side. You'll probably have a blank worksheet. If you've opened it before, if you've opened up Utopia stuff, things like that, then you'll probably see old history either on the recents or there's even potentials to have here. Excel does also have templates that you can download and utilize there, which will show up right here on this side. Um, but a blank worksheet, it works well if you're just trying to do something from scratch. But you can also use templates or you can use old history. I use that quite a bit when I'm, going back to the same repetitive file for a couple of days. Is I'll see that over here in my history. Inside of workbooks or Excel files, you will find worksheets. Worksheets are your just collection of cells. It's where you usually keep, manipulate, and analyze all of your data. By default, when you open up a brand new worksheet, sheet one is what will be titled on the bottom. You can see that you'll have a little plus sign next to it where you can add different sheets. Sheets can be inserted, renamed, moved, copied. You'll find that some of the more in-depth ones will sometimes color their sheets. Now that doesn't color all of the cells per se, but it will color the bottom just to kind of help keep an organization about maybe different program years. We'll use it at the state level to do sometimes different programs. We'll color them so that it just kind of helps keep you straight. But a workbook can contain multiple worksheets. I'm currently working on one worksheet that's got upwards of 5 different worksheets. I've had other ones to where I'm working with probably 15 or 20 different cells within there. Each work sheet will have upwards of about 1 million rows. And column wise, I think it's close to 200, 2 to 300 columns. So there's a lot of data that can be analyzed inside of these Excel worksheets. There are two different kinds of data types inside of Excel that we work with on a regular basis. They're usually grouped into two different ones. One's called text and one's called numeric. Text data types usually are a combination of letters and numbers combined in a cell. Um, if you have just numbers inside of a cell, it is a numeric type of cell. But if you have letters and numbers, so for example, if you type FY24 for fiscal year 24, that would be considered a data type of text. Anything that does have letters inside of it would also be considered a text data type. Numerics are a little bit different because the data type is a numeric. However, there are multiple types of uh, formats inside of there. So anything that is a number is considered a numeric type, but formulas, dates, and other sort of numeric characters. So, for example, equals, plus, division, multiplication, parentheses, those kind of things. Anything inside of there is considered a numeric data type, regardless that it may return some sort of text value. If you were using a formula to return a true false type of a thing, it is still considered a numeric data type, but it is a formula. We usually don't go super in depth about, making sure that one thing is a numeric versus one thing is a text, but I just kind of wanted to get you understanding that there are two different types of data types inside of Excel. Um, let's go ahead and start some navigation stuff. This is probably some of the biggest things that people will find inside of the system to be super helpful. They'll notice that when I'm going through a data sheet, that I'll be jumping back and forth, left, right, up, down very quickly. And users are always kind of curious on how I do it. So what I want you to do right now is I'd like you to open up that data sheet that I sent you earlier. This is the data sheet that it should look like. You'll see that it's very similar to an NRS registration. Um, I did mock this data up based on some real data, meaning just that some of the values up on the side are attached to real students, but the names, birth dates, age, phone numbers, personal information is all completely changed, which is why I can display this information to you guys. But I want you to go on to this sheet and I want you to open up the NRS registration tab. And the first thing that I talk about in here is just jumping around Excel. A lot of people will use the arrow keys. They will go up, down, left, right, those kind of things. And so they'll go up, down, if I'm needing to go over. You can also use your mouse and your scroll wheel. You've got the scroll bar on the left and the right. But one thing that I do on a regular basis is I jump using my control buttons. So if you hit control and then arrow key right, you'll see that I'll jump all the way over to row CX or CK, excuse me. And then if I hit control and go left, I'll jump all the way back to A. And if as well as up down will work the same thing. If you hit control down, you'll jump all the way down to the bottom of your data, which is row 3977. And if you hit control up, you'll also jump there. Now, if you're wanting to select cells at the same time, you can use that in conjunction with your shift button and hit control shift and your arrow keys, and that will select all of your data. This is very useful for when you're wanting to select a large amount of data. NRS registration has a lot of cells that have information, and depending on the size of your program, you may have a lot of rows for each individual student. So to jump up and down, left and right really quickly without having to use your mouse or having to click and drag can be super useful. I do this a lot when I'm doing formulas and different things like that, but it is one thing that I get questions on a lot on is how do I jump? One key factor I want to make sure that you understand is that this will jump to the first blank cell. So if I go back into here, and for example, I'm just going to remove email address and the title, go back to A1. But if I hit my control right arrow, you'll see that I'll end up stopping on column M. So what it does is it always finds your first blank cell inside of wherever column row that you are jumping to. You will notice though that if I do select and control all the way over to CK and all the way down, I will actually select down to 3977. The reason why is it all bases your select on the column and row that you start in. So based on column A and row one, as long as I can go all the way over to the end and all the way down, it will select everything for me. If I was coming over to, say, for example, an emergency uh, phone number, which you can see my first one is down on row five. If I try to select everything, it's going to just hit that first blank and it's going to stop. So when you do select things, you got to make sure that there are no blank cells, blank columns. That's really important, especially when we start talking about formulas and pivot tables next month. But I do want to kind of get you in that mindset of how I do jump around Excel on a regular basis. Formatting is super critical. You'll see that on that data sheet that everything is smashed together. They're not all auto formatted the same. Now, some data types will come over like this. Some files will come like this. Others will already be auto fit. But I want to teach you guys quickly a couple different ways to do an auto fit. Um, there is a button you can actually click underneath. So up in your ribbon, if you click on Home in the Cells section under Format, there's an Auto Fit column. Um, so under Cells, under Format right here, you will have an Auto Fit column width. So if I select all of my data, and you can hit Control A inside of your data to select all of it, you can come over to Format and Auto Fit Columns, and you'll see that it automatically pushes it out. Now the cells are going to expand to the largest value that it can. So you can see that, for example, the first name Zion is short, but yet it goes all the way out to the end. That's because some first name needs to push it all the way out to the end. The second way to do it, and the way I usually do it, is I'll select all of my columns. So I'll just click on the column and I'll hit Control Shift right on my arrow key. And if you come into any one of these lines in between and get that double-headed arrow and double click, it will do the exact same thing. This is how I regularly auto width all of my cells. But the reason I do that is that way I can read all of my data. Data is not squished together. You were finding a couple of things before, like phone numbers, for example. You can't read the phone numbers. The birth date shows me that there's value in there, but the length is too long that I can't see it. Some of these names, these email addresses, they're all just kind of funky. And so I always recommend that you do auto format everything to where you can see it. If there is a cell, for example, that is really big, there is probably some value in there that is pushing that to be really large. Sometimes you'll see that it pushes outside of your screen width. That's a little bit tricky to kind of reformat, but you can. I'm not going to go into that how to do that today, but I just want to make sure you know how to format the cells to the widths that you need. You can do the same thing on heights as well. So if you had multiple rows, you can always double click, or you can go under Format and Auto Fit row height, and it will do the same thing. It will squish down to the height, or it will expand to the height that you need. That's really important when you start wrapping text inside of cells as well, to where you want a certain width, but you want your cells to text or to wrap. Um, Before I move on, are there any questions about any kind of this formatting or moving around Excel? Okay. Again, you are welcome to come off of mute, or you're welcome to type in the chat and we will get those questions answered for you. I'm continuing on with formatting. I will use the term cell reference quite a bit. Um, Cell references refer to which cell I am specifically talking about. So if I come in here to the word John, my cell reference is F6. You always take the letter, so you'll always take the column before you take the row. So if I told you I needed you to select, what the value inside of H20, you'll come over to H, come down to 20, and select that cell, and that's the value that I'm talking about. So I will talk about cell references, different things like that throughout this month and next month. But it will also when I work with programs, when I work with you on different information, I may tell you, oh, something looks funny in D12. So I just that's the way to read these Excel formats. Um, But we also want to potentially reformat some of these cells. So birth dates, for example, are something that come through sometimes really interesting. You'll see birth dates come through with a date and a potential zeros after it. Those zeros would actually reference time. But I don't need reference of time when I'm start talking about birthdays. So I want to reformat this to a value that is just a date. There's a couple of different ways to do it, but I want to walk you guys through this. So what I want you to do is to highlight column H. So click on column H. I want you to right click on it, and you will see an option that says Format Cells. I want you to click on that and you will get a or you will get a box that looks like this. By default, it should be on numbers. I was doing something else, which is why I was on border. But you'll see that I have a bunch of different categories from general to number to currency, accounting, all the way down to custom and specials. But since I'm dealing with a date, I want to make sure that I have a date field. So I want to click on date and then I want to go find the value, which is usually up at the top that has this star and then 3/14/2012. The date inside of here is just showing you what the value is going to look like. You can also plug a day or a day of the week in there if you need, but I just want to do it just based on the or on the date itself. Once I click the date and I click this value, I'm going to go ahead and hit OK, and you'll see that all of my birth dates uh, change to just being a date rather than having that date, that time association with it. Are there any questions? Did anybody get confused on how I did that? Do I need to go over it again?
Adam, I have a question.
Sure.
So when I right click on H, I don't get the same screen that you get.
You don't get the do you have the option for format cells?
I do. So when I go to format,
Do you get
then
this? Do you get this one rather than this one?
yes.
Okay. So if you get this one, you are formatting an individual cell. Make sure that do you see how, so when I click on H, I'll have this down arrow
Yeah.
when I'm next to the H. Make sure you click on that and then you should end up with this.
So I did click on that and I got so it's all highlighted. And then when I right click, I get cut, copy, paste, but only copy and paste and column width are highlighted. Hide and unhide as well. Nothing else.
Can you click on format cells?
Um, on the top bar, only along the top.
So only up here, not on the cell itself?
Correct.
Hmm.
There's no format.
Do you have sometimes because when you download Excel files, you'll need to enable editing. Do you have like a bar
Oh,
right around
okay.
here that says enable editing?
You betcha. Okay. That makes
Okay.
a difference.
Yep. I do apologize. I did forget about that. That is sometimes and I'll get that when I'm downloading other files that either you guys send me or that other agencies send me. Um, it is a security precaution that Excel tries to do and says, hey, I'm not going to allow you to edit this unless you tell me it's okay. So yes, if you have an enable edit uh, bar right here, go ahead and click that. That would probably be a reason that you do. And again, some computers will ask for that, others will not. So even personal computers may not ask for it versus like work computers might. So that's just something to keep in mind is that you may have to enable editing when you do download files.
So then once I've right clicked and opened that, what am I clicking again?
So you
Sorry.
click, yep. So go ahead and click on format cells. You'll get
Okay.
this pop-up box. Click on date,
Okay.
and then you'll want it. The very top option is the star 31412. Click on that and hit OK.
Okay.
Perfect. Nope, those are fantastic questions. I do forget about that enable editing. That's kind of a routine for me just to kind of click that whenever I download different files that I know I'm going to be playing with. So again, there are other formats that you can see. So if you wanted to specifically have 2 months for the date, you can click on the 03/14/2012. There are again multiple types of formattings that you can do, all based on what you feel comfortable or the kind of information that you are wanting to share with the people that you are building these for. So again, this is what your sheet should look like. Everything should be auto formatted. You should have a birth date, and everything should be formulated or formatted into just a date field. A couple things with formatting. I find that every once in a while I want to insert different rows or columns in my information because maybe I'm building a total row in the middle of something, or I'm needing to do maybe a first name last name combination because a lot of our data that you'll find has the first name last name divided. So maybe I want to smash those together, or maybe I want to make it for last name comma first name in a cell. Whatever it is, inserting and deleting rows are very critical. They're fairly easy to do. You'll come to where you want that column to be. So, example, if I'm going to put it right next to first name, last name, I will highlight column H. I will right click on it, and then I will click on insert. You'll see that that automatically gives me a new cell or a new column that I can end up adding different things to. And vice versa, if I needed to get rid of a cell or of a column for whatever reason, I can highlight that column. So go ahead and highlight the one you just inserted, right click, and you can go ahead and go down to delete, and that will shift everything over. Again, if you accidentally delete something that you didn't mean to, just go ahead and hit the undo button. Depending on your version of Excel, it'll either be right here underneath your ribbon or it'll be up here up at the top. There is a shortcut that you can use is Control Z that will undo the whatever you just did. So I do use that shortcut quite a bit. Rows are the same thing. If I want to insert the rows, I will and say I wanted to insert it right here at row 10. I'm going to highlight row 10. I'm going to right click and I'm going to insert. It's going to shift all of my cells down. And then I've got a row that I can insert data in, as well as I can delete the same thing. So I can highlight it, right click, go down to delete, and it will shift all of my cells up. If you want more than one column, more than one row, you can do that. If I wanted to insert, say, 3 rows or 3 columns right here, I can highlight them, right click, go down to insert, and you'll see it shifts all of my stuff over 3 rows. I'm going to undo that, and vice versa. I can do the same thing. I wanted to insert 5 rows here. I'm going to right click and hit insert. It shifts all of my stuff down 5 rows. Again, those are really critical so that you can insert data in the middle of your data, figure out different rows, different things like that. But I do use those quite a bit, especially when maybe I'm messing with names or I'm trying to do a calculation field. We'll do some of the calculation fields where I do insert different things later. But I do want to make sure that you do understand how to insert new rows and inserting new columns. This slide just talks about deleting, which is the same thing. Again, the best way is to right click and click delete. But there is up in the top part underneath cells, you do have this insert option and delete option. You can use those. Again, I find just the right click is a little quicker rather than sliding my mouse up into this cell button. But you can insert and delete from this top portion as well. Um, any questions on formatting? That kind of wraps up all of my formatting and inserting stuff, and then we'll move more into some of the other stuff. Any questions? Okay.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So,
Go ahead.
so if we do these on reports that we pull,
Yep.
anything we delete, is it gonna mess things up on your end?
No. Any reports that you pull as what I would consider what is called static data. So essentially, it takes a snapshot of the data. So I want to remove I want to remove names because really I'm just kind of focusing on other data, and I want to make this anonymous. I can go ahead and delete that. That does not screw up anything that I'm doing, as well as every piece of if on the files that you have today. If you delete anything, that is your own file that you downloaded on your computer. That will not affect anything that I am doing here. But yes, if you download stuff from Utopia or download stuff from the upcoming system Uasis, um, and delete anything on there, that does not delete the data from the data itself. It just deletes it from that snapshot that essentially it took and the file that you have. So just kind of keep in mind that if I did want to remove these completely, I can delete those, but then they are gone. If I were to save this sheet, they are kind of gone. If I closed it, reopened it, those names are no longer associated with it. So when you do delete, there is that if I just wanted to hide it because maybe there's data that I wanted over on the far side, for example, maybe I wanted to do testing kind of information. I can highlight multiple cells, right click, and there's an option to hide. You'll see that my cells now jump from G to N. Those cells look deleted, but they are still there. So I still do have that data in the back end or in there. To bring it back, I'm going to highlight my what's before and what's after, right click and go unhide, and it'll bring all of my cells back. So if you didn't want to delete the data, but you just were kind of looking at, this is a good example because there are, CK is 50, 60, close to 75 or 80 rows. In fact, it's 89 rows. Um, you may not want all that data. You're going to be scrolling back and forth. You can right click and hide different data in order to do it. But no, that will not delete any data that either I am messing with or that is inside of the database itself. Good question. Okay. Find and replace. This is something that I do on a regular basis. I find different information. Um, that I may not want. Um, and so, or I want to replace it with something. Maybe I'm trying to do, I don't know. Um, I can't think of something right now, but maybe I'm trying to replace a program name, or I'm trying to replace all contact types to where I don't want it to say ABE ASE. I just want it to say ABE, for example. You can do that. Um, so there's a couple different ways to for find. Here's the path. You go on home, editing group, find and select find, and then you can type in whatever you want. To replace, you can do the same thing. Go to special, we'll talk about just in a minute. But for example, if you look at this, if I want to replace, say, all of my contact types from ABE, ASE to simply ABE, for example, I can do it up here, but I can also hit Control F. That is my find shortcut. But you'll see that it asks me, what do I want to find? If you were searching for something previously, it will automatically fill that in. But if I want to find ABE space ASE, and I'm going to go ahead and find my next, you'll see that it'll jump down and it'll find all my next ones. You can go ahead and do a find and replace. There is that option as well. So if I wanted to replace, let's go test program one, that's the name there. I'm going to type in test program one, and I want to replace it. Go ahead and replace it with your own program name. I'm going to program it, redo it with a state program as the name. Um, Something I want to make sure that you're aware of is as you do this, you can hit replace. You do have to find before you do replace it, so you can't just hit the replace button once, and then it will start to replace them all. There is this replace all option. Now, I will give you a warning that that will replace anything in there. So, for example, if I was trying to find the word Smith, for example, and I wanted to replace it with Jones for whatever reason, if I hit replace all, it's going to find in my entire worksheet on this any place that the word Smith is. Now, that could be a student's last name. It could be inside of an email address. It could be a user's name, whatever it happens to be. If I hit replace all, it's going to go through and find that on every placement that is inside of there. So just be cautious when you do use the replace all, knowing what it is. Um, and if you do accidentally hit replace all, you'll see that it does tell you how many replacements that it made. I could go through and try to find those now. But if I accidentally did that, I can hit the undo button and it will go back through and read and not do it. So just be cautious when you do a replace all, that it will go through and find it anywhere inside of it. Um, Formulas, texts, numbers, whatever. It will search everything inside of there and replace it. But the control find is definitely something. So if you wanted to find the word Smith, go ahead and hit that. You'll see that I have a Smith there. I'll have a Smith there, and so on and so forth. So just be cautious about how you use the replace functionality. But the find functionality, hit Control F and type in whatever you're finding. You will find that that does uh, replace quite a bit, or that will find all your information. Um, let's move into sorting data. Sorting, I seems to find that we want to sort a lot of our data probably fairly quickly. So what I want to do is I want to sort everything based on, say, first name, for example. There's a couple of different ways that we can do this. What I call the quick sort way, which quick sort is fantastic, but you can only use it on a single column at a time. So if I wanted to sort all my students by my first name, I will click anywhere inside of column F. Do not highlight the column because that will screw it up. That will screw your data up. But just click anywhere inside of the column. You can't even click on the title itself. Come up here to this sort and filter option, and you'll click this sort A to Z. Now, what you'll find is you'll find that this Nishmi actually starts out, and then you'll start with all of your A's. Now, the reason that is happening is because there is a space before that. So if I were to find this, maybe this is an error on data entry side. I may want to go and find who the student is, plug in, go and fix that to where there's not a space between it. I do find this happens every once in a while that there's a space before a last name, before our first name, whatever it happens to be. This is kind of a way that you can double check your data entry, make sure that it's good. But again, this is simply pulling from what is inside of the database, so that space is already there. But maybe, for example, I want to do it I want to do a sort based on contact type and then based on last name. You'll find that I can't quick sort on contact type and then go and sort on the last name because it then ends up screwing everything up. So you're going to need to do a full sort. So the best way to do that is just click anywhere inside of your data, click on the sort and filter, and hit this custom sort option. What you'll find is a value or a pop-up box will show. Then it's going to ask me a couple of different questions. Well, how do I want to sort this? And if your data has headers, like almost all of our data does, you'll see that this checkbox for my data has headers is selected, and you will see then that all of the data headers are in the sort by. If your data ever looks like this, to where this is not checked and you're just on columns, beware that the headers will then be as part of your sorted data. So just make sure that with all of your data that you do have, make sure that the headers are excluded, and then that you can select it. So in this example, I want to select by registration type or by contact type. I apologize. So I'm going to click contact type. Then I want to click by last name. So I'm going to what is called add a level. So I'm going to click this add a level, and then it's going to sort, and then I want to sort by last name. So what this is going to do is it's going to come through. It's going to sort everything by contact type. So by ABE, ABE, and ESL, and then it's going to go by alphabetical order in last name. But maybe I want the last name to be Z to A. I can do that right here as well on the order. And then once you have everything set that you want to do, I can go ahead and hit OK, and there it goes. So you'll see that contact type is A to Z, meaning ABE, ASE is before ESL. And then my last names are going to start with my Z, and then it's going to go all the way through. So that's how you can sort by multiple rows. I do have questions that arise on how that happens every once or by different programs, but you can do that. Again, you have to go into sort and filter, go to custom sort, and then set your parameters here. Um, if you needed to delete a level, maybe I was going to go by last name and then I'm going to go by date of birth, whatever it is, and I needed to get rid of a certain value, just go ahead and click on the then by where it highlights it in blue. Click delete level, and that does remove the level, and then it will sort it based on whatever remaining values you do have. Are there any questions on sorting data? Okay. We're going to move into filtering data, as I do find that filtering data is also super, super helpful. Filtering data allows you to narrow down all of your data from whatever is on your sheet down to just the information you want to see. It doesn't delete the data. It doesn't remove the data. It simply just temporarily hides it, and it filters based upon what you have. One key thing with filtering data is your data does need to have a header row. When you do mess with data inside of Excel, it is always important to have a header row. That does help with when you do formulas, when you do pivot tables, when you do different things like that. If you're charting your data and making charts out of it, it's always critical to have a header row. So just make sure that whenever you do have data that you are messing with in Excel, that it does have a header row, as that does uh, help with most of the things that we're going to do. So what I want to do is I want to filter, um, and there's a couple of different ways to activate the filter option. So the easiest way that I find is underneath the home tab. If you come under here to editing, you'll have the sort and filter. And then I'm going to click on this fourth option down that says filter. When I do that, you will see that I now have little drop down arrows next to all of my header rows. If you didn't have a header row, and maybe, for example, like this student was my first header that somehow I deleted this header, it's going to use this student as my header row. So it won't include or exclude them on my filters. And so that's why it's really crucial to make sure that you do have headers. But let's go, for example, I want to just see who my 17-year-olds are. So I'm going to come over here to age at program entry, and I'm going to click on this little drop down option. And what you will see down here in this scroll area is you are going to see a unique list in ascending order of all values that you have in there. So what Excel does is it looks and says, okay, based on this column that you have, here are all of the unique values that I find. And so we can see that we'll have ages 16, 17, all the way up through ages 77, 8, through 81. But if I want to only find who my 17-year-olds are, my easiest way to do that is I'm going to click the checkbox at select all. That will deselect everything. And then I'm just going to click the checkbox on 17 and I'm going to hit OK. A couple of things that you'll notice when you do that is one, now if I scroll through all of my data, you'll find that all I have are 17-year-olds, which is exactly what I was looking for. But maybe I want to know how many data or how many of these there are. Again, if you remember, I had, what was it, around 3,800 rows. And so I don't want to have to go through and count all of these on an individual basis. Uh, Filtering does something unique down here in this bottom corner, on this bottom right-hand corner. You will see that it will tell you a couple of things. One, it tells you that there's a filter applied if you just hover over this 206 of 3976. But this 206 does tell you the number of rows that you do have filtered. So it is a quick way to say, oh, yeah, I have 206 17-year-olds inside of my program. If I wanted to filter on 21-year-olds, I can click deselect 17, click on 21, hit OK, and you'll see down here in the bottom corner, I now have 110. So it's a really easy way to count the number of filters that you have. I do use this on a regular basis when I am looking at data. Um, Alex does this as well when she does program data analysis as well. This is how we quickly are able to count and see how many of a certain field that we have. You can do more than one filter. So if I wanted to see 21-year-olds who are ESL, for example, I'll come into here, mark only ESL, hit OK. And then you'll see that I have 54 students that are 21 years old and ESL students. So you can activate more than one filter on your data at a time. Just be cautious that as you are doing that, the filters are going to pile on top of each other. So if I want to do that and I'm going to try finding a birth date of anyone, say in a specific year, again, you'll notice that all of my birth dates are in 20 or are in 2002. Um, and so maybe if I was trying to find someone, of course that makes sense because I'm set on 21 years old. That was a bad example. I apologize. Maybe you want to do it based on address. There is a zip code down at the far end. You could end up doing that as well. So again, the more filters you have, yes, the less data you will see, but again, they will build on top of each other just so you're aware. After you've built all of your filters, if you wanted to get rid of them, if you had, say, 3 or 4 filters and you weren't sure which columns they were on because that the data, up here under the sort and filter, if you click that, there is a fifth option down called clear. If you click on that, it will remove every filter that you have set already, and it will give you back your full set of data. Are there any questions on sorting and filtering? Okay. All right. Something else with filtering is you can actually do a range of filters, and this really is helpful when you want to find a range of maybe ages. You can do it with dates as well. But if I, for example, if I wanted to see my 20 to 22-year-old, I would come over here to the age entry. I'm going to hit my drop down, and rather than clicking on each individual one because it's tedious, there's maybe a lot of clicks that I have to do. I can come up here to my number filter and I can select this option that says between. What this is going to ask me is it's going to ask me two questions. What's my lowest number and what's my highest number? And so I want to find anything that is between the ages of 20 and 22. And that is going to give me every student that has the age between 20 and 22. If I hit OK, you'll see I have 383 students that are between those ages. And you will see I have 21, 20, 22. And so I do have all of my values in there. So you can do ranged filters. Again, those are usually important. You usually do those on numbers. You can do those on dates as well. But there are a couple different ways that you can do ranged uh, filters inside of Excel. Again, I'm going to click on Excel, or I'm going to click on there. I'm going to hit clear. And again, that will give me all of my data back. Um, We've still got about 20 minutes, so I'm going to move into some of our more basic formulas inside of Excel. Before I do that, are there any questions? Again, that is kind of the very basics of how to manipulate your data without doing a lot of formulas or without doing pivot tables or anything kind of advanced. You can get a lot of data analysis done just by sorting and filtering. I do a lot of it that way. That way, I don't have to try to figure out formulas. Formulas are fantastic, and as we'll get into that, but just the basics of filtering, sorting, that kind of stuff, you can actually analyze a lot of your data. So, is there any questions about analyzing any of your data up until this point? Okay. All right, so we're going to move more into the formulas of Excel, and the formulas that I'm going to cover today. And if whatever we're going to make sure we stop at 4 o'clock. So whatever I don't get to today, we're just going to pick right back up in March. Um, and so I don't be afraid if we don't get to something today, we will get to it in the upcoming months or in next month. But formulas are fantastic in Excel. They do decrease the amount of time that you can spend in Excel and analyzing your data if you know which formulas you want to use. The big thing is that they also increase the accuracy of your data and reports. Specifically, if I'm looking at here, let me go back to filtering just my 17-year-olds. If I'm wanting to do this with, if I didn't have this value down here of the 206 and it will disappear, especially if you're doing other things. Um, but if I went through and tried to count each one of these as I'm clicking down, I may get lost. I may lose count. Formulas can be fantastic help to make sure that you are counting all of the cells that you are looking at doing, different things like that. So they do help with the accuracy of your data. You'll find that when I push out different data and as we talk about different data in either directors meetings or other meetings like this, I use formulas all the time so that I make sure that I don't screw up. Because again, I'm only human. I will screw up maybe a number here. I'll what's called fat finger number. So I'll enter the wrong value when I'm trying to do things. Um, But that formulas are super helpful with all of it. A couple of important things to note as we do move into formulas are all formulas in Excel do start with an equal sign. So it doesn't matter whether you're going to do a basic sum formula or you're going to do what's called a count formula. Every one of those formulas do need an equal sign before. If you simply just start typing the formula name itself before you do that, Excel will not recognize it as a formula, and when you hit enter, you won't. It won't do anything. It won't calculate anything. And also, you can't use cell references if you don't do it that way. So again, before you do anything with a formula, make sure you hit equals before you do that, in order to make sure Excel recognizes that it's a formula. If you are using the autocomplete, what I mean by that is if you start typing in a formula, so count, for example, if I hit equals CO, it's going to give me a list of formulas that it thinks I want to use based on what I've already started typing. If you are going to use that, you've got to hit the tab button, not the enter button. I do find I still catch myself doing this. So what I mean by that is, so if I'm going to come into here, let me go ahead and clear this. If I'm going to hit equals and I'm going to start typing count, for example, so I type in COU and the blue is what is um, highlighted. If I hit enter, for example, you'll see that it errors out because it recognizes that it's not a formula. But if I hit COU and I hit tab, for example, that'll autofill the rest of the formula in, open up my parentheses, and then I can start using the formula the way it's built. So just keep in note that if you do use that, um, you got to use tab. You can also just double click on the cell or on the formula that you want, and it will autofill in the rest of that formula for you. Again, you will probably find yourself hitting enter a couple of times and erroring out. Again, just it's not the end of the world. Just remember to hit tab on the next time. The last thing about formulas is an autofill function. Autofill allows you to drag a formula down, and it will use that formula that you've already pre-built in the formula or in the cells that you are dragging it into. There are two different ways to autofill. The way I do it is I double click. Now, what you'll see is inside of Excel, you will see this little green square down here in the bottom right hand corner. That is your autofill box. You'll know you've highlighted it correctly when you hover over it, and you'll get a dark black, or you'll get a black plus. So if I'm hovered over somewhere else, you'll see I have this big chunky white plus. If I hover over that little box, you'll see that it turns into a skinny black plus. Um, that's how you know you've select that it will do what you want. Again, um, the way I usually do it is after I build the formula, I will double click on this. So I'll double click and it will fill the formula in below me. But if you wanted to, you can also click and drag. You'll see that there's a green box that it highlights, and then it will automatically fill that formula into everywhere that I do fill. I do bring that up because I do use autofill on a regular basis. Again, I've got 3,900 rows inside of this. I don't want to click and drag that all the way down, so I usually use that double click on a regular basis. But let's go into some of the basic formulas that I use on a regular basis with our data. The count formula. I brought this up a little bit earlier. This will return the number of cells that have numbers in them. So what I want you to do is I want you to come over here to the formulas tab. And you'll see that I have a couple of different cells in here. So inside of B2, so what's next to count, I want you to count the number of cells that are in column A. Now you can do that by hitting equals. You can type count, or you can use the autofill function. Then I want to count what is inside of column A on my NRS registration. The nice thing about formulas is you don't have to be on the same worksheet in order for the formulas to count. So once I have inside of the parentheses, I'm going to open up the NRS registration, and I can highlight all of column A, but I want to actually select everything inside of column A, and I want to select the entire column. I do a lot of full column searches when I do inside of my data, because I do know that blank cells for count won't actually count. So even outside of my 3,900 rows, even though it goes down to 1,000,000 rows, all of those cells that do not have a value in them in count will not count. So once you have that selected, go ahead and close your parentheses by hitting Shift 0, and then go ahead and hit Enter, and you'll see that my count shows up of 3,976. Did anybody not get that value? Okay. What I want you to do then is I want you to do the exact same count, but I want you to do it on column G. So again, in C2 on the formulas tab, I want you to hit equals. I want you to type count. Again, use the autofill or simply type count and open parentheses. Come over here to the NRS registration tab and then highlight all of column G. Close your set of parentheses and hit enter. Now, I'm highlighting the exact same amount of values, and you can see that inside of here, I do have values because I do have last names. However, I returned 3,976 versus 0. Count only counts values that are numeric. Again, I told you earlier that there are two data types. There's text and then there's numerics. Count only counts numerics, formulas, numbers, dates, that kind of stuff. So column A are numbers. It will count the number of students that I have based on their student number. G is text because it is their last name. It does not count. So be cautious when you're using count to make sure that you are using only numbers or you are using text. Doesn't matter. So how do we get around that problem? Because I do want to count value or I do want to count cells with text in them. Well, there's a second formula that we can use, and it is called the counta formula. Again, COUNTA, count, and the A stands for all. What it does is it will count any cell that is not blank. Empty text cells, so like a space, for example, counts as a text field. Formulas, text, numbers, anything that has a or any cell that has a value in it will count. So it also does not count empty cells. So what I want to do is over here on my sheet, I want to come into B3. So I want to go in my counter row and I'm going to hit equals and I want count and I'm going to shift down to counta and I'm going to hit tab. It'll fill it all in, open my parentheses. And now I want to do a counta based on column A. So I'm going to highlight column A. I'm going to close my parentheses and I'm going to hit X or enter. You'll see that I now have 3,977. Does anybody know why I actually have one more than I do in my count row? So the reason I have one more value is because now with the counter value, it is now counting my header as a value that is filled. So you got to be cautious when you're using count and counta, knowing what cells you're wanting to count, different things like that. So that is why I have one additional row or one additional cell counted in using the counta. Now let's go ahead and go in column G. I'm going to go equals. I want to use my counta formula. Again, I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to hit tab. I'm going to come over here to my NRS registration and I'm going to select all of column G. I'm going to close my parentheses and I'm going to hit enter. You'll see that I now count all cells that have a value in them. Oops, I apologize. You now see that I have 3,977. So that is the difference between count and counta. So just be cautious on how you use them, making sure you're counting either numbers or whether you want to count all text fields. Doesn't matter what it is, but that is the difference on how to use it. You will find every once in a while inside of Utopia's um, reports that you will have values that look blank, like maybe work phone numbers, for example, that really aren't. And so if you were to use the count to formula on there, it will count those. Some of Utopia's data exports will do blanks. So what I mean by a blank is a simple space. It looks blank, but there's actually a value there. So just be cautious when you do use those formulas that you do make sure that you do understand how the formulas are coming up with those numbers. So um, we are 5 minutes before the hour. So we've got still a few more or a few more that I want to talk about, but I think we're going to go in. We are going to start next month with this concat. Concat allows us to join text together. I do this on a regular basis with last names, for example. Data that I send out to you, programs on, say, monitorings that we want to do. I use this concat formula on a regular basis. But we will start that next month. So again, next month we'll continue. We'll finish off these formulas that I have here, and then we'll move into pivot tables, and we'll talk about pivot tables and how to use those. Does anybody have any final questions before we fully wrap up for today? Okay. If there is nothing else, thank you guys for coming to today's meeting. I will